Hello Voyagers, it's time for another flipped classroom video. This one is on embedding quotes in paragraphs. So let's talk about how to embed a quote into your paragraph. To really prove your points in your essay, you'll need to include quotes from credible or believable sources. Your quotes will support the points of your essay. Here's how you do that. There are 3 steps. The first step is to introduce your quote. You need to introduce the quote with a logical, smooth lead-in. There are 2 levels to quote introduction, meaning there's a slightly easier, more basic way, and then there's like a higher, more expert level. So the intro level means that you're going to use a sentence starter to set up your quote. I've given you a couple of examples of sentence starters, and you can go ahead and just copy them if you feel that you need this intro level. Something like, this idea is illustrated by the following quote, as blank says, and you give your quote, or my idea is supported by blank, and you name your speaker, and then you go ahead and give the quote. Obviously, after a while, your writing will sound dull if you always rely on these sorts of starters, so think of these like training wheels. Once you feel ready to let go of the training wheels, you're ready for the expert level, and that's where you flow straight into the quote using your ideas as a transition. So that's the first step, that's introducing your quote. Once you've introduced your quote, you're ready to actually write the quote down, and that means you need to punctuate correctly. So the punctuation that you use should be precise or exact. The wording needs to be exactly as it was in the original source. Remember, quotes can be any line from the text, not just something a character says. So here is an example. It's kind of a goofy one if you look in the middle of the slide. You can see you'll give your introduction sentence, and then I want to point out that your introduction sentence does not always need a comma. It depends on whether you would normally put a comma in your sentence. So if you're doing the second style, the expert, you're just flowing right into your quote, you can skip the comma. And then the next thing that you're going to notice is you need to give the author's last name in parentheses, and then you also need to give the page number on which you found the information. And after you've done that, you close the parentheses and you put your punctuation. It comes after all of the quote and the citation. So the punctuation and citation come after the page number. Think of it like a sentence, like that sentence isn't complete until you've given the credit to the author. The third step after you've done your punctuation is you need to explain your quote. Why does this quote illustrate your point? You need to reflect on the quote, and this is your analysis. There are 2 levels here as well, just as there were in the intro, or in the first step. The intro level, you need to use a sentence starter to set up your argument. So a couple of starters that would work would be something like, this quote clearly states, or in this quote we see, this illustrates my point because. So that's the intro level. As soon as you feel ready to kind of let go of that, you can move on to the expert level, where you'll just kind of flow into the analysis more naturally. And you can see there are examples on your paper, 3 examples that show you how the expert level might sound. We're going to go through just one of those examples in a little more detail. So here is the example about genetic modification, and I'm just going to kind of go through it step by step. So if you look at the first sentence, that is our intro sentence. This is an expert level intro, and it says careless experiments with genetic modification could lead to, and it's kind of leading you straight up to a direct quote. So that is our introduction sentence. And then after the introduction sentence, we end up with our actual quote. So notice the punctuation. We put quotation marks around. We did not put any end punctuation, like a period, until after we gave the name of the author, the page number, close the quotations, and then we put the period. So that's the second step. And the third step is your explanation. So this explanation builds on the quote. It says, clearly no scientist or parent would openly claim to support the disposal of babies, yet those who argue for aggressive genetic engineering are doing just that. This is your argument. You are building on what you've presented to make a strong paragraph. So remember, don't repeat the exact lines from the quote and call it explanation. This is something that I actually see a lot in essays, so I'm just mentioning it now to sort of hopefully avoid it. So here's an example of what not to do. It says, Cherry told Pony, you dig okay. And that's from S.E. Hinton on page 120. And then here's the explanation. She wanted him to know that he dug okay. Please don't do that. That's not enough analysis, and that is kind of frustrating for any reader of your paper. Okay, so on the back of your sheet, you see that there are a lot more tips about writing with quotes. So I'm just actually going to paste them here, and I'm going to trust you to read them over. I'm not going to read them to you, but please review them and make sure that you demonstrate this knowledge in your genetic paper that is due next block period. Thanks, guys.